Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Mary Bro. I'm the director of the Crime Victims Institute. Welcome to our seminar. We are excited that you decided to join us today, and we're extremely excited about our panel presenters today. We are located at Sam Houston State University, and we are a victimization research institute. So we mainly focus on victimization research. However, we try to bridge the gap between research and field practice. And each year we have a webinar where we invite practitioners to come in to talk about specific victimization topics. So today we are very hopeful that you can take this information back to your organization, back to your colleagues, and share it with them, the topics of survivors, victims, and trafficking from experts in the area that are going to speak with us today. I'd like to give a special thanks to Dr. Craig, Miltonette Craig, and soon to be Dr. Crystal Hernandez. She is our graduate assistant with the CVI. They coordinated this event, and so we're super excited to hear from each of you. Crystal is going to be the coordinator of the facilitator of this webinar, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to her.
Thanks, Dr. Bro. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Like Dr. Bro mentioned, my name is Crystal Hernandez, and I'm the graduate research assistant here at the Crime Victims Institute. Before we get started, I wanted to let everyone know that this session is being recorded and provide an overview of how the webinar will go. So you'll hear from each panelist for about 15 minutes, and then we will dedicate 10 minutes for a Q&A session. If you have any questions as you hear from each presenter, feel free to enter them in the chat or the Q&A box. The chat box will be monitored by myself along with Dr. Bro, and we will do our best to get through all of these submitted questions. Additionally, near the end of the webinar, I'll be sharing the link to our post-webinar survey. We'd really appreciate if all attendees could fill out the post-webinar survey to have your attendance recorded, share any comments or feedback, and receive a certificate of participation. And so now it is my absolute pleasure to turn it over to our first speaker, Christina Richardson from Trauma Support Services. Christina, it's all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I forgot to unmute first before I started messing with my presentation. Hi, I'm Christina Richardson, and I am from Trauma Support Services. And let me get my screen for you to see it. All right. So, as always, and being the very not as busy as I want to be person that I am, I didn't send my bio, but I am the executive director of Trauma Support Services. I'm also a licensed therapist in Texas and in Maryland. And so I'm going to talk today a little bit about trauma support services and kind of give you a trauma briefing. I hope that my counterparts here will go a little deeper into what we're going to be talking about today, but I'm going to give you kind of overview of what we do at Trauma Support Services and a look into a first peek and step into trauma itself. And so for Trauma Support Services, our mission is to provide healing and resilience for individuals and communities affected by trauma through accessible mental health therapy and trauma-informed education. And our vision is a future where all communities impacted by trauma have access to support, advocacy, and education essential to healing. Our offices are located in Dallas off of 635 and in Greenville, if you're familiar with the area. But we also have therapists who serve all of North Texas, and recently we just been offered a grant to issue services throughout Texas. And so just reach out to us for more information about those our agency. So a little bit about what we do. I am here representing our Trauma Care Institute, which is a program of trauma support services, and we provide free therapy services regarding the work we do with victims of crime. So when we think about all of our survivors and people in the community who have been victimized, TCI is there to provide that trauma-informed space to train the people that are in the community. So it was founded because we found that a lot of therapists, social workers, advocates, lawyers, law enforcement professionals, they were not trauma informed when they were handling cases dealing with people who were victims of crime, specifically human trafficking, sexual assault, IPV, all of those. They were not trauma informed. They were doing well at their job, but they were not doing so well with being trauma informed about what the client was dealing with. And so TCI kind of came out of that realm of how do we create a community where the clients that we serve have trauma-informed therapists, but we also want to make sure when they leave our office, the lawyers they're speaking to, the police officers they're interacting with, the advocates they're talking to are also coming to them from a trauma-informed lens. And so that's where TCI stepped in. We have free monthly trainings. We also have trainings upon request. I do a lot of trauma-informed spaces kind of conversation with agencies to make sure that their agency and the workers in their agency are trauma-informed. And so you can always reach out to us, email our training email to get more information about what our training department does in the community. Another department that we have is our direct services department, which provides the trauma therapy. So our clients are able to see a therapist for free for up to 2 years. The only qualification is that they be a victim of crime. There is no police report needed. There are no witnesses that are needed. It's just like you coming in and saying, this happened to me. I need help. It's impacting me. How can you help me? And that's what our therapists do. We work with therapists in the community who provide these services to our clients. Additionally, for our direct services, we do have a direct line or advocate at the ME's office, the medical examiner's office in Tarrant County that provides services to people who have lost someone due to homicide. So what they will do is, what our advocate does is get the reports from the ME. She sends out a brief packet to let the family know what resources are available and how they can come to us or join us for services. We know a lot of times if you're in the field that you give families so much information and they will act as if they've never received this information at all. So we are that service that also follows up with a phone call to make sure that the family is okay. So I'm going to go a little bit about the trauma. So this is a trigger warning again. So trauma is a result of an event, a series of events, or set of circumstances that are experienced by an individual as physically, emotionally harmful, or life-threatening, and that has adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So that is our broad definition of trauma. So basically, trauma is something that happened to you that has created an opportunity for you to not feel like yourself again, for you to feel different in spaces, for you not to feel safe at home, for you not to feel safe going to your car, for you not to feel safe at work, for you not to feel safe with your family. So trauma is an experience that you felt that has created a new experience for you in your life. So as people who work in trauma, we talk about big T and little t trauma. But what we have to also understand is that big T trauma and little t trauma is different from everybody. A rear-ending accident for somebody may be a big T trauma for one person, but it may be a little t trauma for somebody else. What we have to understand is we don't know if that big T rear-end accident was triggering something from a larger accident that happened before. Or the little t is because that person had never been in an accident or always gets into little minor things and they have become accustomed to it. So when we're talking to our clients, we have to look at them from the lens of what they're telling us, not what we categorize their trauma is. So even in the sense of human trafficking, we have to look at the narrative from what they're telling us, how bad it is for them, not how bad we think it should be. Another thing that I wanted to highlight that I listed all of our qualifying traumas. As you can see, when it comes to working with trauma support services, if you have a client, all of these things are traumas and crimes that we deal with. And so when we see like stuff like bullying or elder abuse, or it was another one, identity theft, it's kind of on that lens of like, that's next to adult physical assault, or that's next to adult sexual assault. You don't know how something shakes up somebody else's life and how it makes them feel, or what new experience it gives them, what trauma reaction it gives them. So we cannot be the judge on that. We have to allow them to tell their own story, sorry. And as advocates, that's the main thing we have to do. We have to advocate for what they're telling us, not advocate for what it should look like. So when we're thinking about all of our clients, and I was thinking about particularly in human trafficking clients, we look at them like, oh, they were human trafficked, or they were a victim of trafficking, and that's it. But what we're also not seeing is any childhood trauma that they may have experienced, any intimate partner violence that may have been at home they were growing up in, any parents that may have been on drugs. And so we have to look at our clients from a holistic view. We can't just look at them and say, okay, this is trafficking, this is what they went through. No, if we have a trauma-informed lens, then we have to look at all those things. We also have to understand that there's historical, intergenerational, individual, and institutional trauma that is also at work with these clients in particular. And so when we think about maybe a client who is a survivor of trauma or is a human trafficking survivor, is it intergenerational? Was this something that was in their neighborhood or in their family? Was it institutional? Were they a part of systemic discrimination and just could not find a way and just went to this? Or maybe they were, kidnapped. There are so many things and so many assumptions. One of the things I feel like we make assumptions on is that human trafficking is always a kidnapping and it's never maybe voluntary. When I say voluntary, I'm not in a sense of like I chose to do this because I'm filling out an application. But when I say voluntary, I'm saying like I have done everything I can, and this is what I ended up in. It's so much spectrum when we think about all the trauma, where we end up. Even when we think about domestic violence and intimate partner violence, a lot of women did not get into the relationship wanting to be abused or knowing that they were going to abuse. A lot of times it's surprising when it happens, and they have to process that. They have to figure out a way. And we as advocates cannot put that label on of what something should look like. And I want us to keep saying that because when we're doing trauma work, it's not about what we feel like it should look like. It's not the prescribed Webster's Dictionary depiction of what this is supposed to look like. It is based on what the client says it looks like for them. And so that's where we get into what we work on at Trauma Support Services, which is trauma-informed care, trauma-informed education. You'll see I have trauma-informed and I have informed highlighted because it's trauma-centered, it's trauma-educated, it's all the trauma buzzwords all in one. That's what we have to be when we're working with clients who have experienced trauma. And so being trauma informed, and you see, I also included a person. Being trauma informed is a program, organization, system, or person that is trauma informed and realizes the widespread impact of trauma and understands potential paths for recovery, recognizes the signs and symptoms in trauma clients, families, staff, and others involved with the system, and responds by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices, and seeks to actively resist re-traumatization. And going back to why Trauma Care Institute was created, our focus is not to re-traumatize our clients. Or have clients be re-traumatized when they go talk to their lawyer or go talk to the police officer. Because what we found is it's hard to get anything done if your client is in a trauma state. And so what we want to do is make sure that the people that our clients are working with are trauma informed. And there are so many ways that looks like. And these are a couple ways. So we have to build safety and trust. A lot of these people, especially people who have survived trauma, have trust issues. They do not trust. They have safety issues. They do not feel safe. A lot of places. Are our agencies safe? Can they trust the staff at our agency? Can they trust us with their stuff? That's what we want to make sure when we're trauma informed. Effectively communicate. Do not overpromise and underdeliver. They have had that all their lives. And so now they're in this system trying to get help. Are you effectively communicating what your agency can actually do and has the capacity to do? Or are you over delivering or over promising things that y'all don't have the capacity for, or that there are long wait lists for? So we want to make sure that we're effectively communicating those things to be trauma informed when working with these clients, especially when we're thinking about trafficking clients. We've had clients who were trafficked, and because the system was so convoluted, they went back. Like it's taking me too long to get the resources I need. It's taking me too long to feel this sense of safety. It's taking me too long to anything. And so they end up back in the same system. So we have to make sure that we're effective in our communication and building that safety and trust to let them know what's going on. We have to also look at from a lens of socio-cultural lens, in that everybody's situation is not the same, even if they come in and are of the same race. So everybody is different. And we have to recognize that when people walk in our doors, and treat them as an individual and not try to play this, I don't see color, I don't see race, or this is our policy, this is our procedure. We have to see each individual for who they are. Collaboration. It doesn't help if you have food if the person needs shelter. It doesn't matter if you have shelter if the person needs food. We have to make sure that we're collaborating with those people in our community to make sure that our clients are receiving the resources they need, because without it, we are leaving them in a lurch. It's like the Maslow's hierarchy of need. I need to feel safe, I need to have food, and I need to have shelter before I can go up the hierarchy. So if you're telling me that I have to come here to get these resources to get out of the situation I'm in, you also need to know how to get access to the other resources for me, or tell me where I need to go. But that's a part of our role as being trauma informed and working with clients who experience trauma. Another thing is recognizing the trauma symptoms, and that's where trauma-informed education, polyvagal theory, all of those things come in, because we have to recognize when our clients are in a trauma state, we won't be able to get a lot done, but we have to recognize that and not use it as a negative against them, but helping them through those things. And the last thing is we have to come from a strengths-based approach. A lot of clients have never been told that they were strong. They have never been told that they can do anything right. When we think about our intimate partner, violence survivors, they have always been told that everything they do is wrong. And so something as simple as you coming here today was strength. You showing up for you and your kids today shows how strong you are, how resilient you are. We have to keep telling them even the small things, so that way they can know that they can do hard things, because for so long they've been told that they couldn't. And then I think that was it. So, but I wanted to show you in a very short time frame what kind of trainings and what kind of things we posture our organization on, how we want the community to reflect what we're doing in our agency outside. And so if you have any questions, I can open up now for questions. And I'll stop sharing. Oh, my contact information is right here.
Thank you so much, Christina. I think we can all agree that that was a lot of helpful information in a short amount of time. So truly, thank you so much. Like Christina said, she'd be happy to answer any questions now. If there aren't any at the moment, I do have a few to kind of start us off, if that's okay. Oh, well, we have one from one of our panelists, so let's go. How do potential clients learn about the work that you do?
So they can go to our website. Another resource is on our website. We have a form that clients can fill out, and it's, was it self-identifying form, I think. And it just tells all of why they are looking for services. And then our specialists will reach back out to them to get them set up for our services. And you can go to our website. I'll make sure that y'all have that information.
Great. Christina, you mentioned something, I believe, when you were talking about recognizing trauma symptoms. I don't know if I heard incorrectly, but you mentioned a theory or some type of theory.
Yes, the polyvagal theory.
Okay.
A lot of times we think when clients come in that they are just being hard to work with, or just, they just don't want to be here today. But when we think about a trauma response and we think about people being in a trauma response, we have to figure out, are they in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? Are they activated from their amygdala? So all of that kind of goes into play when we're working with trauma clients. And I talk to lawyers a lot about this because they have a case to win, and they're like, oh, I need them to show up. But you're also like, okay, but did they get triggered by being in the same room with their assailant? Did somebody's cologne in a hallway trigger them from their incident? Did coming to this area that may be similar trigger them? So when we're trauma responsive, we're able to say, okay, they were okay like 5 minutes ago. Let's go take a walk and kind of see what happened, and see if I can bring you down, other than saying, I have this case, we need to do this today, you got to snap out of it. No. How do we get them to just be present and be aware and be okay as they process whatever it is that was going on in those moments?
Got it. Thank you so much for elaborating and sharing that. I did want to ask you, so can you talk a little bit about what is the most challenging aspect of working with trauma and or trafficking survivors? And then on the flip side, what is the most rewarding aspect of working with trauma and or trafficking survivors?
I would say the hardest thing, maybe not for me at this time, but in the beginning, you do have this cookie cutter image of what it should look like. When I worked at the DV shelter, I felt like DV should look like this. But what I quickly learned, and I stand on this, is I feel like verbal abuse is the worst form of abuse. My black eye will go away. My body may heal, but being told that I'm nothing, being told I never do anything right, being told I'm a horrible mom, being told all these things for years, it's a narrative that is hard to untangle. And I think a lot of when we go into shelters, and I've had friends that say this too, like, oh, I would never get abused, or I would never allow this. And that's a language that you have to check when we're thinking about, you never know what somebody has gone through, and you never know what you would do until you're in that situation. So I think the biggest thing is untangling that thought that every type of abuse looks the same across the board. And then wanting to talk about it. Like, do we want to talk about the most horrible day in our life? Do any of us want to sit here and recount the most horrible day in our life? And so we have to come from a different approach of, how do I make this place safe? And how do I communicate safety so that way that client can feel better eventually about sharing this very intimate moment in their life when they were so vulnerable? And that's like one of the hardest things, because it may take a while. The most rewarding thing is when they find that trust and safety in you and they share those things, or when they do something they've never done before. Those are the most rewarding times of working with trauma clients.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We did receive a few questions, and I want to try to get through them. So somebody's asking, so you stated that clients could find this service through the website, but how do you inform potential clients to the existence of the site? Do you work with local law enforcement or court services?
Yes, so we work with, we're connected to most of the PDs in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We are trying to expand our reach to some more Texas PDs. We are part of a lot of coalitions in Dallas, Fort Worth. So the Plano Coalition, Collin County Coalition, Tarrant County Coalition, Dallas County Coalition. And if there are any more out there that we need to go to, please let me know, because I would love to attend. But a lot of times people know us. They'll ask us to send them packets, brochures, and so we'll do that too. So we try to make sure whoever wants to know about us knows about us, and then get it out there. We have a conference too, and so a lot of people know us from that. And so it just depends. But yeah, we are not trying to be a secret. So please get my information so you can tell your clients about us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Another question we received, how do you begin to rebuild that trust and connection with a client who has gone back to the source of their trauma? Like how you pointed out, if they don't have access to the resources that they need.
So I think a lot of times, as a therapist, because I'm a therapist, as a therapist, I try to give my clients resources. And so one thing as a therapist, I have to realize that they're making choices. And if they decide to go back to a trauma or decide to go back somewhere, I did my role and I will be there. And that's one thing I always let my clients know, even when I was working at the shelter, I'm going to be here. I know it's hard. If you know the statistics, it takes a woman 7 times to leave an intimate partner violence relationship. So it's not going to be overnight. There are going to be times when they leave and have to come back. And so all you have to do is show up. And our role is not to be judgmental, even as advocates. When our clients leave our resources and then have to come back, it's not on us to be judgmental. It's on us to just be there for them because they're working through some things. My greatest example is always telling friends and women, especially when it comes to DV and IPV, how many times have you gone back to a guy that just cheated on you? So we all do it in some capacity. We all go back to things that hurt us, but we all also have to have that grace to help people as they're processing whatever it is they need to process to get out of something.
Thank you so much, Christina. We do have another question. I think this will be a fun one. What are
Okay.
some common misconceptions you face when working with lawyers? Things lawyers tend to oversee, and this is coming from a current pre-law student.
Okay. Mostly just people are hard to work with. Like they're just hard to work with. And I'm gonna compare lawyers and teachers. And so if there's any teachers in the room, I'm so sorry. I am not picking on you. But a lot of times we are trying to do our job. We have these numbers, we have these cases we need to win, we have these test scores we need to get out, but we do not have the time because of administration to stop and look at who we're dealing with. And so a lot of times, if we do stop, we see the trauma, but I want to do my job. And so I think the biggest thing with lawyers is knowing that stopping is okay, that taking that client for a walk around the building is okay. Taking that client for a drink of water at the fountain is okay. Clearing out the ladies' room and letting that client debrief and sweat it out, do some jumping jacks, whatever it is okay because you need them there for this case to be won. And if you don't stop, they're going to shut down and they're not going to be there. So understanding that pushing forward and pressing is not the answer. It's leaning back and helping them to figure out how to get reset because they want to be there. They showed up. It's just something happened between the drive over there, the parking in the parking lot, and them getting to the court. I hope I made that clear.
Yes, no, that's great. Thank you so much, Christina. I think we have time for one or two more questions. And so, oh, wait, we got another one. Let's see. Are you an LCSW or an LM, the acronym's LMHC? This individual is looking into a graduate program, but trying to choose what would be the right path. They volunteer as a CASA advocate, I believe, with children. They enjoy being an advocate for children who have been victims of trauma.
Okay. Email me because I love these conversations. I love to talk to new therapists in the field who are trying to figure out where they need to go, which way they need to go. I'm an LPC and then I'm an LCPC for Maryland, and I'm also a clinical mental health counselor as well. So I got all the letters behind my name, but I love what I do and I want to be able to do it as many places as I can. And so yes, email me, get my email me. I would love to chat with you about that and about your program.
Perfect. Okay, I think I can ask this one last question and then we can move on to our next presenter. What is the most important thing that you wish everybody knew when it comes to working with survivors of trauma and or trafficking?
That is not all on you. A lot of times I always say my clients are walking in with luggage and they may have a carry-on, they may have a big bag of carry-on and a backpack. They may just have a purse. It's not your job to choose which one they unpack first. So you have to let them unpack it. And it's sometimes hard. I've been in sessions where clients have just given me all the fluff, and I knew it was fluff. I knew it was. And like the last 15 minutes, I was like, oh, and I may just, had a little incident in college that did this, and this. And you're like, wait. We've been here for 40 minutes, and you just want to drop this on me. But something I said in that session allowed them to feel safe enough to leave it with me so we could process it later. And so we have to know that it's not linear. They're not going to go from childhood to present. It's going to be, I don't like my boss. They get on my nerves. my brother gets on my nerves too, but then also, so my grandmother, we have incest in our family, but then my boss. And so it's going to be like this thing where like, which problem is it? And so I always tell my clients, I'm not going to ask you to unpack a bag that you're not ready to unpack. And so I think as clinicians, as advocates, we have to allow them that space to do it in their own time that feels more natural and feels more easy for them, because we also have to help them pack it back up and go home. And if we aren't doing the work in the right way, we will leave them with these bags with clothes hanging all out and stuff hanging all out, and they're not ready to be great in the world. So we just have to be patient and take it as it comes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina. We really, really appreciate that. We do want to be mindful of everybody's time, and so I think we will go ahead and get started with our next presenter. We are so grateful to have Brian Simmons here with us today. And like with the last presentation, if you all have any questions for Brian, please feel free to enter them in the chat, and we'll do our best to get through them during the Q&A session. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to Brian.
Thank you very much, Crystal. I really appreciate the opportunity to present for the Crime Victim Institute. It's just nice to be here today. Thank you for everyone who's attending too. It's a neat experience. I'm trying to get this up here real quick so I can share it, and then we can kind of go from here. All right, move this over. Okay, is that showing good there for everybody? Crystal, you seeing that okay?
Yep, looks
Yeah,
good.
okay, great. Okay, awesome. Thanks. Okay, well, yeah, so I'm glad to be here. So my name is Brian Simmons. I just like Christina, I'm a licensed professional counselor, so I'm in full-time private practice. In addition, I have a training and consulting company as well, where we do a lot of mental health informed trainings. We focus a lot on neuroscience, neuroregulation. We assist individuals and businesses, NGOs, GOs, in helping just kind of improve sort of the function of their organization from a mental health perspective, but not just from a mental health perspective, but also bringing congruence and alignment with the nervous system and sort of generally understanding more in depth on how it functions. So that's kind of what we do. And so I've been in private practice for quite a while. My wife and I are actually in practice together, which is a great experience that I love so very much. And it's neat because she and I sort of have a really interesting ability to sort of do a 1-2 punch kind of around this particular subject. I specialize a lot more in the survivor care, but interestingly enough, she's a licensed sex offender treatment provider. And so she spent the last 20 years of her career focusing heavily on helping the rehabilitation side. So together, collectively, we're able to speak, I think, in some unique ways to just the audience in general around this, both on the survivor side, but also on the consumer side, which is neat. And we very much enjoy that. So let me get into it, I guess, real quick here. So let's start with what the most rewarding aspects are working with survivors. Some of these questions were recommended, and I think they're great questions. Matter of fact, I may actually reference the questions that were given to me because I think they were actually a little bit better than the questions I came up with on my own. So thank you very much to y'all for that. But so what I think the most important questions is, what's one of the most rewarding aspects of working with survivors? So for me, this is life-changing work. Okay, this is absolutely life-changing work. And when you have the ability to help somebody that has experienced some of the most extreme versions of abuse that we can conceptualize, think about, and we're able to take that experience and we're able to help somebody create a new understanding and a new experience with themselves that they can then carry out into the world, and to see that they're able to use that learning and that re-regulation in their nervous system to create safety for themselves. I don't know. That to me is just one of the most amazing aspects of doing this work, to see somebody healed and walking that healing out. And so many times when it happens, right, you kind of cross that line where confidence starts to really be built internally. Just the level of success that they feel and the confidence that a survivor will feel, it's really, really cool. It's really, really cool to see. So the second thing I would say that is one of the really rewarding aspects of doing this work is I'm a prior law enforcement officer. So I was a law enforcement officer for about 14 years before I got into counseling, which also provides me a little bit, I guess you might say, a bit of a unique experience, because I've dealt with this sort of on both sides, both the healing side, but also on the other side, where I was the first line responder out there that was trying to assist somebody who was either being rescued from a difficult experience or someone who, as a result of their trafficking and the positions that they were put in, were now engaged in a negative experience with law enforcement potentially, right? And there are a lot of those out there, especially to me, the law enforcement and first responder profession is starting to really move in a direction where there's a lot of embracing of new ideas as far as how to conceptualize and work with survivors and to recognize them, to recognize the state that they're in and the elements of force, fraud, and coercion that are behind human trafficking, more than just looking at it in a punitive standpoint. Now, that's not to say that that is done effectively in all scenarios. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say we're there yet, right? But at least it's nice to see a shifting happening where there's much more of a cooperative interaction that's happening with some of the nonprofits that are out there specifically to help deliver individuals to resources in a really effective way. Because I'll tell you, one of the most difficult things for me, and really honestly, the experience that sort of, I think, brought the passion in my heart for being able to work with human trafficking survivors, is because there was one in particular that I encountered on the street. And I found her in my partner and I ended up finding her at the early stages of her trafficking before she really had endured some of the mental, emotional, and physical hardship and addiction that would come with what her experience would unfold to be. And we were unable to do anything of value for her to assist her. We knew exactly what was happening, but we were unable to have a resource, a vehicle, or an avenue to intervene. And it was clear that the level of fear that she was in that experience was preventing her from making the outcry that was needed for us to be able to take any sort of affirmative action in her defense. And I can tell you that that was an incredibly, incredibly difficult experience for me on the street, because it flew in the face of everything that I was wearing that uniform to do. My job was to be there to be able to help and to be able to save people from circumstances that they didn't want to be in. And in that moment, there was nothing I could do to convince her, my partner or I, there was nothing I could do to convince those two young women that what was happening, that the situation could be better or that they could escape. That's how afraid and fearful they were of their trafficker. And so fast forward, just because I think this is a critical story that's important to tell, a year later, and again, trigger warning for any of you who are listening, I just want to put this out real quick, okay, because this can be difficult. A year later, we found her behind a dumpster wearing the exact same dress she was wearing when we saw her the first time. And that moment has stayed with me for my entire counseling career. You see me get a little choked up over it now. Interestingly enough, right? Like, this moment was powerful. Her physical condition, she was so malnourished and so drug addicted by that point that she was about 72 pounds total. And the only thing that we could do was to take her to a mental health facility and have her committed, in the hopes that they would be able to basically nourish her back to life and address the addiction part of what had occurred for her, right? But to see the decline in less than 10 months of that human being into where she was when we met her the first time to where she was when we found her the second time, deeply, deeply affected me. And it has, like I said, informed the passion of what I've done from here on. So interestingly enough, I didn't think that a lot of survivors of human trafficking would want to sit across the table from me knowing about my law enforcement background. Because at that time and early in my career, I expected so many of them had negative encounters with law enforcement that would in essence be haunting them, right? And that was okay. I expected that. But the reality was the fact that I have the background I do actually made them feel safe enough to come in and sit in here. And it has really surprised me. Professionally, it's really surprised me. But I think it speaks very much to their resilience. This is one of the most resilient populations that you're going to find when they can unlock that capability, because a lot of times they've had to endure so much. And so many of the survivors that I've worked with, whether it was in the nonprofit capacity, I worked for a year as a director of clinical care for a nonprofit anti-human sex trafficking organization, or in here doing the face-to-face counseling and therapy work that we do. A lot of times what I've heard from them is that they recognized that this was something that they wanted to heal, that they recognized that there was an issue with law enforcement, that they wanted to heal that thing, that issue that they had. And so as much as I think it is a valuable attribute. I think what also that goes into is the recognition of how important it is to be a safe male in this space. I think that of all things is the greatest honor that I feel like I have when somebody walks in this room and trusts me, and they've had a difficult and they've been a survivor of human trafficking or even just sexual abuse or maltreatment of any kind by my gender, right? Is that there's an opportunity that I can help ease or erase a survivor's fear of my gender, right? That I can represent for them what a safe male potentially can be. And through that interaction, which is so critical to helping somebody, again, feel safe in space, but also to be able to have somebody to talk to and ask questions about what should a relationship look like, right? Like what's a right way for a guy to respond to this? What's a wrong way? What's the thing? What should I look for? What are red flags? How do I even know how to be safe if I'm going to date? How do I know if someone's going to hurt me? Because for so many survivors, they don't have that basic information that the majority of us have. When Christina was talking about the holistic view of a survivor, I cannot tell you how critical that understanding is, because the roots and tenets of vulnerability for a survivor began years and years and years, in most cases, before they were ever trafficked by that first individual. What that initial history did for them was leave them vulnerable. And so the places where they are being abandoned first is oftentimes within their family unit. That is the first place, or by the society and culture as a whole that they're interacting with. The people around them are oftentimes the first ones that have introduced survivors to a lack of safety. And so when we look at trauma and we talk about trauma, but this kind of gets into my next question. I'm kind of just rolling here. So the most challenging aspects of working with survivors is this. These are some of the most complex cases that a therapist will ever work with, because they are so multi-leveled as far as the levels of abuse, the lack of fundamental knowledge about how to be successful and have successful interactions in so many different areas and aspects of life. Then you add addiction on top of it. Then you add the stressor of relationship. Christina also mentioned polyvagal theory, which I thought was awesome that she mentioned that, because one of the most important aspects of what Dr. Stephen Porges, the founder of polyvagal theory, talks about, and this is so critical in any sort of relationship work that we do, is that one of the things that he changed sort of the general understanding about as far as stress and trauma goes is that when we interact with somebody that we care about, or somebody that we want to love us, or somebody whose love we quote unquote need, and he lists that love as a survival need. He doesn't list it as a relational need. He talks about it from the context of, if you do not have people that you trust, care about, and can be safe with, then your natural response within your nervous system to interactions relationally is going to be one of life threat. So it is going to be just as dangerous for your nervous system to interact with another human being as it's going to be to go through some of these experiences. And sometimes the question, I think, comes up often, if this is so difficult for survivors to go through these experiences, how is their nervous system able to be in a place where they would tolerate this or go through this? And I don't mean tolerate as in choose. I mean not absolutely go into a state of decomposition mentally, physically, emotionally under some of the horrendous stress and abuse that they're going to go through. And my answer is always the same. Their relationship, their nervous system was already conditioned for this by the people who did or didn't love them, because they were already acquainted with life threat experiences from a survival standpoint at an early age. And that's fundamentally, I think, so critically changing when we look at relationships. So, like, for example, if I have an argument with my wife and it feels like our relationship is not on stable ground, what Porges would say is, expect me to act like I'm in life threat potentially. That's how important relationships are to the critical structure of how we function. And so when that has already started to maladapt our nervous system to a state of dysregulation, we can see from that experience that we're already moving down the path of an impact of chronic stress. And so really, truly, what takes a survivor or what takes a survivor to the place where they're sitting in this office most often is that you're talking about a sustained period of chronic stress that has slowly over time adapted the nervous system. And the way it has adapted the nervous system is to disconnect mind and body. And what I mean by that is it mutes or turns down the brain's ability to recognize normal signals of distress inside of the human system, inside of the physiology of the body. Once that starts to happen, we are on a path to chronic dysregulation that likely will take some sort of intervention to change. Because now our system is on a path of adapting slowly over time to a chronic stress state as it is supposed to do biologically. And the result of that is going to be a progressive state of disconnect where we will be soldiering on in our brains, surviving, but our body is screaming in distress with no one listening. So once you take chronic stress and then you apply acute stressors, like some of these really abusive individual moments that survivors will go through, this is a perfect recipe for a nervous system that is completely dependent on a trafficker for survival. Because the ability to generate answers to some of the struggles that are happening internally oftentimes aren't there. The brain is so heavily locked inside a cycle of survival at this point that they're looking for the environment to give them regulation, because they're unable to create regulation internally a lot of times for themselves. And so this is all part of this progressive cycle of abuse that traffickers are so good at creating and instilling inside of survivors. It is evil, and it is pathological in how it oftentimes is carried out. And so much of the abuse cycle of what we see that leads to trafficking begins with what we would identify as Romeo pimps, or relationships where women were identified to be vulnerable, maybe at a young age or even later into life, where they didn't recognize that the person that they were beginning to interact to had an ulterior motive, and that motive was going to play out, but only after the bond of a relationship was established. And so that's a lot of times what we see. So we're taking apart really complex situations inside of the treatment room when we're working on this. And sometimes when a survivor comes in, they're still very much even in a state of feeling dependent on that trafficker, and a loss, feeling a really significant emotional, physical, and cognitive loss of what to do without that person. They feel oftentimes incredibly attached to that individual still. And that relationship sometimes will haunt them in the years to come as they're trying to have healthy relationship, because even in healthy relationship, they're going to be balancing that relationship, that love relationship, against how intense the relationship was with the trafficker. So if it isn't to that level of intensity, which is trauma bonding at its most extreme, right? Sometimes they have a hard time identifying if they really truly are in love, if they feel love, or sometimes they are seeking an adrenaline-based interaction as opposed to, which is basically, again, neurotransmitters, dopamine and norepinephrine are driving that, versus a relationship that's run by oxytocin. And oxytocin is that bonding love chemical neurotransmitter in the brain that really draws us to long-term love and connection. So even just as I present a fragment of this, hopefully I'm able to show a little bit about how complex some of these cases can be. And, the interesting thing too is that when we talk about this dysregulation inside the nervous system, this is one of the questions, that's why I'm on it, because I thought it was a great question, right? Which is, over time, chronic dysregulation in the nervous system has the exact same impact as PTSD does. The system is designed to function a particular way, and when you start to put pressure on it, you will see behavioral changes or symptom changes occur as a result. So whenever symptoms or behaviors, it's two ways it comes out. Symptoms or behaviors are showing the maladaptation within the nervous system that is starting to occur over time. So one of the things about survivors that I've experienced a lot too, that I just want to share, is they're going to test you. Like sometimes they're going to test you inside of the treatment room, or they're going to test you sometimes inside of the nonprofit experience, because it's part of the natural way that they have learned to protect themselves. People aren't safe. Just because you have a title doesn't mean you're safe. They have been abused and hurt by so many people that had power and authority over them, that a lot of times it comes with the idea of power and authority in general. So there's an anticipation sometimes and an expectation of that. And so I think that's really, truly important. So what guidance would I give on how to build your skill set so that when you're sitting across from them, you feel confident yourself, but also you feel like they're going to see what they need to see in you? And the first thing I would say is this: is a therapist needs at least one modality to address cognitive distortions, core belief issues, and secondary gain. These are the primary things that will stand out as a struggle inside your therapy. And so it's important to have a modality that allows you to feel like you can effectively deal with that. For me particularly, and it's not even a clinical modality, I like neurolinguistic programming probably the most to address a lot of this. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't do CBT, a little bit of REBT, I do basic behavior theory, but also systems model is critically important because it gives you the knowledge. Anything within the systems model category oftentimes is going to give you some of the basic information you need to help restructure these interactions relationally with people. And when relationships are triggering, you can never come out of that state inside your nervous system. The reason being is because unless you're isolated inside your home, we have relationships everywhere. We cannot escape typically the relationships that we experience. So that's why it's fundamentally, they're so fundamentally difficult and a core part of working through, right? You need to reconsolidate, meaning you need to change the experiences that people have dealt with, the memories. You need to actually physically change how the energy of those experiences is stored within the construct of a memory. And so to do that, I highly recommend having knowledge of basic neurophysiology, right? But then also additionally, one more technique, a single technique, advanced techniques that gives you the ability to help reconsolidate memory. Memory is considered to be, and I'll say this quick and then we'll open it up, I guess, to questions. But memory is considered to be unstable when it comes forward. What that means is that from a neurophysiology or a neurological standpoint, memory can be influenced when it's brought forward. And so the whole purpose of reconsolidation and reintegration of memory is that as a memory comes forward, any information that we have from other memories that has happened from the time that memory occurred till the next time it's revisited, that new information is reconsolidated inside of that memory. And now that memory moves forward in a more adaptive way. And the one thing that will lock trauma in for somebody, if we were going to say this was a traumatic moment, every traumatic moment possesses something called a peritraumatic dissociative moment. A peritraumatic dissociative moment. And that is the one moment inside of that experience where the nervous system experienced powerlessness, which is the most dangerous emotion for the human experience for us to go through. Because if we were powerless, then it defeats every idea we have internally inside our brain that we can protect ourselves. And if we don't know if we can make it through something, then that's where we lock down. So you may go through the experience, feel great about it, you feel like you handled it well, but the post part of experiencing it is where the powerlessness has not been figured out yet. And that's what causes it to keep coming up, because the brain is trying to solve a riddle that it doesn't know how to make it through. And so having one sort of advanced technique that will give you the ability to reconsolidate memory, and oftentimes these are eye movement related techniques, is some of the most empirically validated. EMDR is good for this. ART is another example of it. One of the things that we're fortunate to be pioneering is a technique called multi-channel eye movement integration. This is what a lot of the training company focuses on. And multi-channel eye movement integration is helping to sort of redefine the mental health space in the sense that this is not an eye movement technique from a clinical standpoint, because we don't work on the cognitions at all. This is a body stabilization technique that we are now able to take and train advocates who are working directly with human trafficking populations. This is one of my personal core areas of importance for me. So we can train anybody who is direct care services, government, non-governmental, anybody with this technique that is creating this reconsolidation process, and we're seeing phenomenal results. Additionally, we're also taking it specifically to first responder and military groups as well, so that those direct care advocates who a lot of times, like I said, trafficking victims, sometimes folks aren't going to trust those that are in power and authority, and they're going to build a relationship with somebody. And our goal is to make sure that whoever they have built that connection with within an organization has the ability to actually do this kind of work with them and stabilize the body. Because if you can stabilize the body, then one of the fundamental concepts of NLP is this, that if an experience has a chance to restructure, it always becomes adaptive. It most frequently becomes adaptive. And this is what we're seeing, because the physiological arousal and distress in the body will lock down somebody's mind to the point that it can't complete the consolidation process. And that's where the stuck point happens. So when you can calm the body enough and to release the brain to reconsolidate, you now have a changed experience and you have a changed life. So these, to me, are the necessary elements that I can give to you as a way to move forward with your clients. All right, questions, I guess. Sorry, there's a lot.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was very, very interesting. And I'm personally just fascinated learning about all of this, the whole neurophysiology, that one, that word, and the MEMI. Like there's just so many different techniques. And I just personally find it really fascinating. So thank you so much for sharing all of that information. We have a few minutes for a couple of questions.
Sure.
The one that we've received so far, where can we learn more about understanding the neurophysiology slash systems model of addressing trauma when working with trafficking survivors as advocates?
Okay. So, one of the things, not trying to self-promote, but we have a trafficking training that addresses a lot of this. We also have a stress and trauma training that does as part of the whole MEMI process. So if you're looking for like a one-stop shop to kind of get a whole overview, we offer a certification training on both of these elements. But I would say fundamentally, if you're looking to really have a strong foundational knowledge and you want to go pursue that yourself, Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, although it's incredibly difficult, he's basically the godfather of trauma care, right? And a lot of where the concepts have been built from come from that. There's really good work by another gentleman called Eric Gentry. He has great information as well on how to do some of this work. Polyvagal theory and books on polyvagal theory are also a really, really good place to start for this. And so if you're looking for like three solid training materials to go for, that's where I would start. Um, and and so, like I said, if you're looking for trainings, that's available here for that. But there are also other providers out there that are really good. One of the probably fundamental or foundational, I would say, that's not the right word. Um, One of the places to go that gives a lot of overall good training in a lot of different areas is PESI, PESI. And you can find a lot of trainings there as well if you're interested in that. So yeah, so those would be my recommendations for that.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we can
You bet.
do maybe one more. Do you
Okay.
think that therapists should give education on what relationships should and should not look like, regardless of a person's self-disclosure of victimization, in hopes of preventing further victimization?
So I will tell you this: that I have a very structured approach to treatment that I do with everyone. That treatment is based on a phase model approach where we put folks through different stages. Like, for example, I do a lot of what is probably a little different than some folks do by getting a full clinical history from everyone up front. And that includes a chronological order of what experiences that have been difficult that they've been through. Now, we don't go into it and open them up in a way that wouldn't be trauma informed, but I'm getting the information on the front end to be able to assist them. And so like we can move from that point forward because I know and they've had a chance to share it a lot of times. And we gauge it, you know, patient to patient, client to client to what they're comfortable with, right? But what I'm the net one of the next phases of treatment is I put every client through a neurophysiology presentation to answer this question. And this neurophysiology presentation is the basic information about how the nervous system functions that we don't receive on a day-to-day basis. We're still operating as a whole in a lot of ways on 20 and 30-year-old knowledge in most of our institutions, businesses, and structures. And the neuroscience is taken off. Like it's just going at a rapid pace right now. And so there's a lot of information. And what a lot of that information is showing us is, again, that there are patterns to the human nervous system that do not change person to person. We are more alike than we are different. And when we understand how our nervous system is designed to function in certain circumstances, we can almost even get to the place of predicting how we're going to show up in a given situation, whether it's going to be a symptom or a behavior. And this challenges a lot of the sort of allopathic medical, standardized medical community's view of how we look at symptoms and diagnosis. But the nervous system is showing us that symptoms really oftentimes are rooted in fundamental problems that exist in a whole different place than the symptom is actually showing up. And so if those things aren't addressed, we're going to have struggles. But the majority of what people in one way or another are going to have an issue with is around relationships. So inside of that neurophysiology presentation that I give to every client, whether they're coming in for a relational issue or not, is knowledge on relationships and what healthy interaction looks like. So the answer, yes.
Wonderful. I think I'll do one more. Since we do
Okay.
have several students here on logged into this webinar,
Okay.
do you have any advice for students or even just anyone on this webinar who is interested in potentially going into the therapy world, maybe considering counseling? And so, do you have any advice for folks who might be considering that?
Yeah. So I think probably the best advice I can give is probably to really pick up one of these advanced techniques fairly early in your career, so it can start to become a normal part of your counseling experience. I've heard a lot of folks that I've worked with that have been in counseling for several years before they were introduced to a technique like this, that it's a real epistemological shift for them in how they think about the counseling world, or the experience inside the treatment room. I mean, I am not exaggerating when I tell you that EMDR has been incredibly effective. Before I knew MEMI, it was the go-to, and I use EMDR and MEMI as a 1-2 punch, right? But I can tell you that I have the opportunity, and I feel incredibly blessed to watch miracles happen in my office. It feels like on a regular basis. It is a weekly, 2 times a week, 3 times a week, sometimes 2 times a day experience, simply from understanding the ability that we have to reconsolidate memory. And it changes the dominant discourse on what outcomes are believed to be possible in the mental health world. And I'm telling you that there is still a belief that people can't heal anywhere near to the level that a lot of them are able to heal. But if that piece is missing, then they will continue a lot of times to not be able to override the primitive parts of the nervous system to incorporate new adaptive cognitive information. They'll know the right thing to do, but we won't be able to execute it a lot of times, simply because of how distress is encoded inside the nervous system. So these techniques really teach, as a fundamental piece, a lot of the neurophysiology knowledge that somebody is going to need. Any of these techniques, EMDR is a good one. I mean, it's a long training, but there's a lot of knowledge there. ART it's an advanced, but so any of these that are teaching a fundamental technique like this, there's often neuroscience as a part of it, and I cannot recommend it enough. It could be the difference between this profession feeling like you're doing a lot and feeling like you're just absolutely transforming lives. You know what I mean? Like in incredibly short periods of time, because those techniques can be so effective so rapidly. So that'd be my best piece. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. We really, really appreciate all of the
yeah.
information you shared. We, again, want to be mindful of everyone's time. And so I think we'll go ahead and shift over to our final presenter. We have Davina here with us today. And then same with the other two presenters. If you all have any questions as Davina is sharing her piece, please feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A box. And then so I'll just turn it over to you, Davina. Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me. And I feel very honored to be here with Christina. And I'm sorry, I think I forgot your name just briefly because my mind, but and just listening to the amazing work that y'all do in the therapy and counseling section for, trafficking victims and survivors. My experience is very different. I am an attorney full time, and I will actually start a little bit of, with a little bit of a story and tell you kind of how I got here. So as I mentioned, I'm an attorney full time with Lone Star Legal Aid in the Crime Victims Unit, especially working with trafficking survivors. I actually started under the Justice for Human Trafficking Survivors program. And I also am the executive director and founder of My Create, where I work with survivors who do advocacy work to start businesses. So first, I'll start all the way back in the mid 40s and the 50s. My parents were born and raised in Nigeria, in an area not too far from one another. My mom comes from a family of 10, my dad from a family of 8. And my mom's family was pretty well off. Grandpa was an engineer, mom was a baker. They did okay. My dad's family, on the other hand, didn't have as much money. My dad, being the oldest of 8 children, was then sent to live with other people, family members who agreed to take care of him, feed him, clothe him, and help pay for his school. This is something you hear about in many, many places, right? People who can't take care of their children, they're sent off so that they can still get the support that they need elsewhere. However, what also happens to many, many people, like what happened to my father, is that he essentially was turned into a slave. He was made to take care of all the other children in the household. He had to get them ready for school, feed them before he could go to school, before he could eat. And if he didn't complete all his chores, he was hurt. The double whammy for him was that because he was always late for school, he would also get caned at school, but he was excellent in school. He did great in school. The teachers couldn't figure out what was going on with him until one day someone just asked the question, "What is going on?" And he told them what was going on. And from there, I think things greatly improved. He has unfortunately burn marks and scars on his back from his time with that other family, well, his extended family. And I remember learning this story and thinking, wow, that makes sense. Of course, in a poor country like Nigeria, yeah, of course, I can see, where there's not a very strong government system that does work like that. I can see where it can be rampant. Fast forward to my first year of college at UT Austin. I loved working with homeless populations and especially with children. So I started volunteering with an organization, the chapter version of Stand Up for Kids. And at the time I was a theater major. I was going into English literature. That was my focus, working with children who are unsheltered and homeless. While we were at one of our meetings, we had a speaker come in and they just started off with the question, what do you think children under the legal working age who are unsheltered and homeless, what do you think they do in order to take care of themselves? Of course, it's like, I have no idea. I'm guessing steal, I don't know. And that's how I first learned about the term labor trafficking. I learned that there were populations across Travis County of children who were unsheltered and homeless, who were being forced to sell drugs, to run guns, to steal, and all this other stuff because they really didn't have another recourse. Going home or going to, whatever place that they were living at was not an option. And this was a more viable option for them, especially being underage to work. And it really shocked me. I was like, wait a minute, in this here US, in this rich, big old country, we have that happening. What happened to my dad, in a way? Ever since then, pretty much my whole life changed. Everything I've ever done since then, learning that this really is a global issue that affects every community at any time in many different ways. I ended up going to law school after graduating with my theater background and my English lit background, and really wanted to focus on human rights, which is what I did. I went to Michigan State University College of Law, really focused a lot of my research and internship work on anti-trafficking. I was able to do study abroad programs where I could do policy research and whatnot abroad, and went on to do my Master of Laws in American University's Washington College of Law. And I stayed in DC for a while after law school. I was able to do a lot of really cool things in the anti-trafficking field, working in India as a research policy for one of the members of parliament, trying to integrate international laws on slavery, modern day slavery, and trafficking into what they already had, and just different things like that. However, during my time in DC, I also was able to connect with a lot of those survivors with lived experience and just have conversations, what's going on, what are you doing? And during that time, I learned that a lot of them were actually doing anti-trafficking advocacy work. They were keynote speakers, they were writing plays and songs and books and all this amazing stuff. But in those same conversations, I'm also hearing, yeah, but I can't pay rent this month. I don't have money for gas. I don't have utilities. I might be out on the street next week. And I was just like, wait a minute. You're telling me that you were invited and spoke at an event where Oprah was paid $350,000. I know how to look up these things. And you're telling me that you have no place to live, but you were the keynote for whatever event? Come to find out, and I know it's shocking, I guess I should have known, but I learned by talking to people. Come to find out, yes, people expect, and there is a culture of entities, whether it be media, whether it be organizations raising, doing fundraisings, that survivors are going to do the work and that they shouldn't be paid. That's abnormal. And I just thought that was such a strange thing, right? I had been in the nonprofit world for a while. At that time, I had co-founded another organization where we were consulting with medium and small businesses on keeping their supply chains free of forced labor, child labor, and things like that. And I just was like, I mean, I'm doing advocacy work and I expect to be paid for all the work that I do. So then my focus kind of shifted and I started My Create back in 2018. And My Create, I'll say before I get there, one of the other conversations that really solidified that I wanted to do this was someone told me they were so present their play in, I can't remember what forum it was, somewhere in DC or New York. And they had a contract and everything. They were going to get paid. But within that contract, they didn't realize that whatever marketing materials they brought to the location would then be owned by the people who were putting on the conference. And the person had spent all this money, you know, blowing up some of their favorite photos and things like that. And they lost the legal intellectual property rights to even show those type of images in certain types of sizes on their website. I mean, or anywhere, because it now belonged to the conference people. And I was like, wait a minute, did you read the contract? Yes, I read it. I had a friend read it. I thought I understood it. And after I read it, I was like, yeah, it does say it right here, intellectual property, blah, blah, blah. And one thing I started realizing is there seems to be this, no, there is a revictimization when survivors are not in emergency, mode, when they're not in transitional mode or kind of at the end of transitional mode and they're wanting to do the work to warn others or give others another side, they're being taken advantage of again. And essentially they are actually being re-victimized. We've heard stories where survivors told their story to a media outlet, and that outlet took it and made movies without their consent, but because they didn't understand the contracts they were signing, the other companies were able to do that. So I started My Create first to just help people with cease and desist letters, and also just to understand certain basic rights. Like, yeah, you should write agreements and contracts, and and I was able to be successful with helping with that. But then a lot of the entrepreneurs, honestly, and advocates were like, well, it's great that you're teaching us this, but I really want to do it for my own business. I actually have a business idea. It's going to be survivor led. It's going to help other survivors, X, Y, and Z. So when I first started My Create, there was not a lot of anything I would call business coaching. And then years, literally just within 2-3 years of starting it, I turned it into a business coaching program for survivors who are entrepreneurs, advocates, who are interested in learning how to start their business without too many risks. With My Create, I have 2 adult programs, one called Roadmap to Business, which is a very foundational program. We talk about business structures, agreements. We talk about how to register your business, how to stay compliant, understanding regulations, understanding especially your intellectual property, your rights of publicity, your copyrights, your trademark rights, all of that I did not learn in law school because those were electives I did not take. So I had to do a lot of trainings and stuff like that on my own, which is fine. I have to do CLEs anyways. And so that's our foundational program. We meet 3 hours for 8 weeks over 3 months, so that it's an incubator program. So, but I don't want it to be too intense. And then I also have my Next Steps program where I work with those who have completed the foundational program. And now we're thought leaders, we're thought partners. We're thinking of how to overcome, any issues, or we're, giving each other positive updates and things like that. We're meeting monthly. And so that's My Create. And with My Create, the services are completely free for survivors of trafficking. And I try to provide as much support, whether working, I've paired businesses with law students in the past. I've to help with research for their businesses or their industry, give them as many resources as I can throw at people. as often as possible. And so that I don't now that is my heart job, and in terms of that's my baby. So I don't get paid for that. I just love it, and that's my my non full-time job. With Lone Star Legal Aid, I started off in the Justice for Human Trafficking Survivors program in the Crime Victims Unit. Because I've done so much work in the anti-trafficking space, that was my expertise. And so I specifically have been working with survivors of trafficking on all different types of civil legal matters in the counties that Lone Star Legal Aid serves. That's immigration, so applying for U visas, T visas, VAWA if necessary, and that is, I mean, my first case was actually a name change case, and family matters, helping reunite families, helping with divorces from abusers, tax and debt issues, all the different things. So to answer some of the questions, when it comes to what is it like working with survivors, the first thing I'm going to say that working with like artistic survivors and entrepreneurial survivors, and then working with survivors who are dealing with their legal issues, I'm going to echo what the other presenters said. There is a lot of complexity in these type of cases. Now, for my create, I've had people who were starting businesses while they were in a shelter. But generally, we're working with people who are out of their situation at least for like 18 plus months, right? They're somewhat safe. With Lone Star Legal Aid, sometimes they may still have to be with their abuser because of whatever issues or whatever their circumstances are. Now, with both, one thing I do want to say when it comes to working with survivors of trafficking and those that have endured trauma, we talk about trafficking as this or that, labor or sex, right? But actually, when you start to talk to survivors, trafficking is much more than that. It's taking care of my abuser's children, or taking their mom to the hospital. It's doing the grocery shopping, right? It's if I just take from the people that I've worked with in the last 5+ years, it is doing legal research and drafting contracts. It's manning the stand at the gas station that the trafficker owns. It is so many different things, and that's day to day. So when we talk about the complexity of cases, there's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot of intersectionality. Sometimes your trafficker is your grandmother. Sometimes your trafficker is someone, in the off instance that it has happened, that has Romeo'd you and said, I'm going to take care of you, but you have to do this for me to do that. There's so many aspects of trafficking that when you are dealing or working with someone who has all those traumas, you do need to kind of understand what lane are we working in right now, and how can I actually provide you with support. When I'm doing my civil legal work, I'm not necessarily asking, okay, what happened to you, if I don't need to know that, right? If it's not going to help with your name change. It may be prudent, though, to ask those questions if you're looking to get a name change and you have a criminal history, and that criminal history is directly tied to your time with your trafficker who told you to hold drugs, so that you could take the fall for the drug possession, right? That becomes a little bit more complicated. So one of the ways that I ensure when I'm working with a survivor in my full-time job as a civil legal attorney, I try to figure out what are the different issues, that you are facing. What are the different challenges that you're trying to overcome? Okay, now what is the history to those challenges? Sometimes that's important. With my entrepreneurial work that I do with my Create, I don't ask about anybody's past at all. There's just no need for it. I'm working with a lot of referral programs and entities that have already done the screening. I don't have to do a double screening, at least for now, where my Create is at. And we're really going to focus on what are you trying to accomplish. Big caveat with that is, if someone's lived experience or instance of trafficking is a part of their business. For example, they are speakers or performers or consultants, where their work hinges on their particular trafficking story or stories. We may have to discuss a little bit of it, mostly to discuss how do you protect yourself legally, how do you protect your story, how do you protect your intellectual property. So that may be a little bit where people may share, or what are your limits? I say actors and actresses, they have limits, right? I don't want to be filmed smoking. So you're also allowed to have boundaries around the work that you're doing and around what you're sharing. You don't have to ever answer questions that really don't align with the work that you're trying to complete or the goal that you're trying to achieve. So that is a little bit about me and my work. I hope it's helpful to students to see that where you ultimately end up in life may never be where you actually thought you were going to start. I thought I was going to be opening theaters for street and homeless children as shelters where we could put on shows and things like that and do community work as a way to help kids make a little bit of money and go to school. And that is definitely not at all what I've done. I have traveled a lot working with different organizations and entities to address different aspects of trafficking in different ways. And now I still get to work with artists and creatives, as well as provide restorative justice in a way that I didn't know. Last thing I will say is with restorative justice, this was something that I learned a lot from survivors. Justice looks differently for everybody. Just the way that trauma may present itself or be activated in different instances, even unexpected instances, at least for us, right? For someone who's not experiencing that particular or having that particular trauma response, restorative justice looks so different for everybody. I've had where people say, I think that I would rather see my trafficker go through some kind of therapy, because obviously they're thinking this is normal behavior because that's what they were taught. Or they should be in jail for the rest of their life. So restorative justice is something I'm very passionate about. And I'm very passionate about listening to what that sounds like for different people and trying to help them achieve that form of justice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Davina. We really, really appreciate you sharing some background about yourself and your journey and how you kind of ended up to where you are today. So truly, that really helps a lot. I believe we have time for a few questions. We did receive a comment/question from a student here in the audience who really loved your story. They're a future, and so they're wondering if they can get in touch with you for any advice or maybe even potential internship opportunities.
Definitely. I love working with students. Y'all don't even know. I have work for y'all, yes. And I love talking about the journey to where I am too. So most definitely. Crystal, I think you have okay, my
I'll pop that in the chat here, your email, so they can get in touch with you. Perfect. Thank you
thank
so
you.
much. And I did have a question, because I believe your organization has like a youth program or
Yes.
program. And so I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about what it's like working with adult trauma and trafficking survivors compared to maybe adolescent or children in that area?
Definitely. So I will say my full-time job, I work with both youth and adults who have been trafficked and experienced other crimes. But with My Created is different. So we have a work and trade training, I guess, program, and then we have our entrepreneurship program. And all of those are especially to work with at-risk youth slash opportunity youth and those who have experienced trafficking or other, I would say, like markers that could lead to trafficking later in life, to just provide them with different ideas that there are different options if you are in a situation where it feels hopeless. So I'll say that working with youth is very different than working with adult survivors. Um, Adolescents and younger people, tend to not want to be very forthright with a lot of what has happened to them. Some of them are very ashamed that it's happened. A lot of them, it's happening in the context of family, which is something I think in the anti-trafficking world, we're just really now realizing the magnitude of familial trafficking as, a marker of later in life trafficking. And some of them really, especially if it is a complex situation where it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend, they're LGBTQ. There's a lot of different things that they're still working through as adolescents and trying to understand in themselves. And then now it's like, great, now I have to go talk to an attorney or PD again, So it's different working with youth, and just that you do have to remember almost how it was for you when you were younger and what that was like when you were interacting with people that you kind of had to interact with. You don't want to, but you kind of had to. And giving them that grace and that room, and making sure that they understand why they are in the room with you. If I'm working with a survivor who needs to apply for some kind of immigration status, I walk through the process and I answer any questions they may have about any words, but I definitely want them to understand in full why we are here, why I'm talking to them. With adult legal clients and entrepreneurs, it can be, I would say, extremes, right? Sometimes it's someone is like, you're going to take care of all my issues right now. Great. I'm so happy I have you in my corner. They're calling, they're emailing, they're telling me everything from the time they were born to today of what's going on. And then you have others who, and again, there's cultural sensitivity. So people from different backgrounds, there's going to be that included. But then you have others who don't really want to say much, especially because it's hard to corroborate, what they're saying. And they feel like there's nothing that can be done. With adults, I will say that oftentimes it may not be the end goal that they were hoping, an expunction or a vacator of their criminal history, but at least we can find other workarounds to help you get to a place that you need to so that you can open up your bank account, whereas you were denied before because of a negative financial history, right? So we can still find other ways to be supportive. I hope that was helpful.
No, it was. It really was. Thank you so much. We have one more question. Well, first, I just wanted to thank you again for sharing your story and the amazing work that you do. They're wondering if you provide trainings for other attorneys, because this individual is based out of El Paso and they work with youth and juvenile justice. And so they're wondering what court-appointed attorneys could learn about the circumstances of their youth.
Love it. Yes. One of the things I am always loving to do with trainings, conferences, all of that. I love to talk about this, especially. And so, yes, feel free. I can also, you have my MyCrate email. If you're interested in more of the civil legal side and working with youth and adults and trauma-informed lawyering, reach out to me there and I'll probably just email you back with my Lone Star Legal Aid because that's usually how I'm able to do those type of trainings. But yes, 100% happy to help and support.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, if there are no other questions, I do want to be mindful of everybody's time. And so before I turn it over to Dr. Bro for our closing remarks, I just wanted to remind everyone that we have our post-webinar survey. I've shared the link already, and then I'll be popping in the links for our CVI website, social media, and then the agencies from our presenters. And so I think that's about it. Dr. Bro, did you want to close us off?
Yes, thank you, Crystal, so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Christina, Brian, and Davina. Your experience and information was just valuable to all. And thank you so much for allowing our participants to connect with you with your information. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of follow-up. We may even be following up with you for our other events that we have during the next year. So I appreciate the participants that remained on the webinar. I hope you can, again, take this information back to your organization and use it for yourself as well. But we just appreciate presenters and the participants. So thank you.